Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and we have one of our authors on today. But even more than having this author on to talk about his book, we have an opportunity with this book that I want to share with you guys. So before we get started, remember to go over and grab your free subscription to Breakthrough Author Magazine. You can find that at breakthroughauthormagazine.com. And also, if you're just kind of dabbling around and trying to figure out, do I want to write a book? Don't I want to write a book? Do I need to, what are my first steps? We have a couple new courses I think you'll be interested in. Prep Your Expert course, which is only $47 and really goes through everything you need to know before you get started. And when I say what you need to know about platform building, when that actually starts to be successful, your book development, most of our best books come from actually working with a book developer, and then publishing, learning more about publishing options, what to watch out for when you are hiring a publisher. So once again, Prep Your Expert book, that is where you can find that, www.prepyourexpertbook, $47. We also have a new Build Your Author Avatar course as well. You can find that at buildyourauthoravatar.com. And what that is really all about is really a deep dive into who that audience is for the book, because most of the time our marketing doesn't hit unless we have it written for the right audience. And sometimes that audience is not even who we think it is. So today's guest is James Weeks, and James Weeks is an internationally known spiritual leader, author, and finance mentor who has spoken at Harvard University and has been a guest on numerous radio and internet shows, including KPFA, Africa Today, KPOO, the Abaji Lounge, I hope I said that right, and Ancestral Voices. He has been featured in MarketWatch, Associated Press, and International Business Times. He is the producer of an upcoming documentary, Across the King's River, Finding and Fulfilling Your Life's Purpose. He's also a Babalawo, or priest, in the Imfa spiritual tradition of West Africa, and helps clients with strategies for emotional, spiritual, and financial wellness. James is a native of St. Croix, Virgin Islands, and currently lives in Oakland, California, with his wife and youngest son. To learn more about what he does, visit acrossthekingsriver.com. So this was really an exciting opportunity to reproduce this book. And here's why. His first publisher really just put him in a lot of general categories. So we are actually republishing the book. But what is really exciting is understanding the categories, the BISAC codes involved here, and asking Amazon for the creation of new codes. Unfortunately, up until the summer of 2020, when BLM really brought into awareness some of the Black issues and things like that, Amazon has begun to expand some of their categories to include Black categories. So for us, this was really an opportunity when we put this book in to go and ask them to create some new categories there that really fit into Black literature. So stay tuned. Here's our interview with James. Welcome, James. I'm so glad to have you on the show today. I think people are going to get a lot of really good information from you.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor, and I'm excited to be here.
So this is Black History Month, and this is the perfect book for Black History Month. Very spiritual, it's a deep book. It's a very deep book. How did you get into this spirituality where you sort of went back to your African roots?
Well, I always like to say, because it's true, that my son led me there. Around 2002, my son was going through a very rough time. At that time, he wanted to be a thug. And so we were working. I was working for corporate America, the Clorox company, in fact. And my wife was working as an editor at the time. But he started going down the wrong path. He wanted to be a thug. And so it was a very scary time. And so during that time, I wanted to get help for my son. So I consulted a diviner, a shaman who was from Nigeria in town. And he told me about my son, but he also told me about myself. He said, oh, that I'm meant to be a spiritual advisor, a diviner. I'm supposed to be guiding people spiritually. And so I started to look at my son as a messenger, not so much as a troublemaker. And so I took my son with me to West Africa, and I decided, well, if this is what my destiny is, if I'm going to be successful at this, I might as well explore this. There were some things that he said that resonated with me. And so I went, I went to Africa, and they were able to help my son, and they were able to transform my son over time. So when I look at my son now, he's a totally different person. He's a father. He's an amazing businessman. And I'm doing the work that they predicted that I would be doing. That's how I got in more deeper into the spiritual side of it. And the book came about because over the years, I've developed a big following on social media, and people were copying and pasting some of the affirmations and inspirations I was sharing with them. And so they were like making their own book. They would copy it, paste it, and stick it on the mirrors. And so then they would ask me, well, do you have a book? And then I said, I'll give you a book. Yes.
That is so funny. So it's almost accidental, sort of like when I got into this business, there was I see this need, and I never intended to be here. It sounds like you sort of did the same thing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so, because all of us, I feel, are on a spiritual journey. And so what I like to share about my journey is, a lot of it looks like haphazard or chaotic, so to speak, like one thing leading to the next without rhyme or reason. But when you step back, you could see like, oh, there was a reason. There's a bigger plot unfolding for all of our lives. But we because we're humans, we tend not to see it because, we're going through our ups and downs and we're frustrated and we feel stuck. But there's a thread in all of our lives. And so as I look at my life, I see that a lot of things were planned a long time ago. And all of these things, all of these different, stages in my life are connected. And that's what's so beautiful about it.
You know what it is, and I've related that on interviews before that, when I went from college to publishing to advertising to real estate, you would think, what in the world am I doing? How is that all connected? But as a business owner now, I can see I own a publishing company. The advertising was, learning the marketing and platform building, and, running my own, real estate actually helped me with sales. And now I had to do the accounting for my own company. So I love that you just said that, because that's sort of how I felt for a very long time. Like there was this, why am I here? And why did I go over there? And, am I actually on a path here? So, and I think most people don't evaluate it the way that you just did. Like now that I look back, I see the pieces fall into place for me. So
100%. So for example, the work that I did in corporate America, I worked for customer service. I did that for 17 years. What was I doing? I was listening to, consumers complain and ask questions all day long. So that helps me in my job now as a spiritual counselor, because what am I doing? Well, I'm listening to people talk all day long, right? And I have to sit there and listen to what they're saying. So there's so many things. And then in my mid-20s, in the Virgin Islands where I'm from, I was working at a newspaper. And I was writing, I was a reporter, right? But when I moved to the States and I got, started working for corporate America, I never thought that side of myself would come back. I never thought that I would go back into writing. For many years, I didn't feel like called to write. But then when this development happened in my life, there it was that these gifts from the past started playing a role again. So everything in our lives, I always say, I feel that there's nothing wasted as we look at our lives. Nothing is wasted. I feel that God or our spirit guides, whatever term you want to use, they're very resourceful and they're very strategic. So nothing goes to waste, and some things that we have dropped, we will go back from the past and pick it up again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, it reminds me, last week, one of our romance novels said, what did you think of my book? And I said, it's just like romance is not my genre. And I had that moment, since I used to write mystery novels, that I was like, I'd just rather kill somebody than kiss them. Mm-hmm. And we got a good laugh out of it, but it was one of those gifts because I am, a little bit of an investigator. So of course that is more top of mind than, the going out and being a romance novelist. So you put together this big audience, and you guys, I have to tell you, before we jumped on, I was researching the first book that he put out, and he has 145 really great reviews, which is astounding that you have that many. So in this new book, which is just a kind of a second edition of the old book, the first book you put out. You're expanding your wisdom in it. So what have you learned since your first book that you wanted to share with everybody?
Well, so many things. So there's so many different reasons why I guess I'm doing this book, second book. So one of them was I discovered that I'm related to the great African-American actress, Cicely Tyson, right? And so I didn't know that before. And it just happened in a haphazard, again, everything is haphazard, a haphazard spiritual way. I was mentoring someone on the East Coast in finance. And she was telling me, oh, I'm really enjoying Cicely Tyson's book. It's such a great book. And then she said something bizarre, she said, I'm reading this book and I'm really in blah, blah, blah. And she said something like, maybe y'all are related because she knows I'm from the islands. And when she said that, it took me back to a childhood memory that I had completely forgot about, where did I hear my father say that once? I'd completely forgotten about that. And so after I got off the phone with her, I said, well, let me find out where her parents are from. So I Googled where her parents are from, and they're from the island of Nevis, which is where my grandparents are from, right? Even though I grew up in St. Croix. And then I called my sister. I said, well, did Dad ever say that? Do you remember Dad saying that? And she said, yes, he did. Yes, he did say that. And then she told me that my aunt in New York always used to say that too. So I called my aunt in New York. She said, yeah, it's true. She is a distant cousin. And then I found out something else. In Cicely Tyson's book, she mentions my great aunt by name, Mrs. Weeks, and so what my great aunt, what she did was when Cicely Tyson's mom and her dad broke up, she helped them find a church. So there it was, someone that I've never met, this woman from Haiti who I was talking to, said some random thing, and it sent me on this family journey. And so I wanted to share that as an example of how spirits communicate with us, because I wasn't thinking about this ever. And I realized that this is part of the story of my family, and they wanted to share that with me so that I could share that with my children. But this is something that they're proud of, but which is something that I would not have known. So part of the story is how spirits communicate with all of us in different ways and how they attempt to reach us, And then there were other revisions to the book, like I started going deeper into finance, and I found, a spiritual side of finance that fascinates me about balance and patterns and how things ebb and flow even in the market, and how a lot of the principles of spirituality could help us navigate financial things if we had that spiritual understanding, So there were so many things, that.
Yeah, no, and I love that aspect of it with the finances because, okay, you guys, I'm not judging here, but you'd be amazed how many people will call me and say, I'm an abundance coach and this is what I'd like to do. And then when I tell them a price, they're like, yeah, I don't have any money. And it's like, wait, you're like, it's almost like they're telling me they have their own work to do. You know what I mean? Like it's like someone trying to help someone else without actually doing the work themselves, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's a big issue in our spaces. It's a big issue in like spiritual type spaces or life coach spaces where, as you said, a lot of people haven't done the work to that degree, or they haven't lived in that experience. So then it becomes difficult for them to create that abundance for themselves and to help people in practical ways to create that abundance.
That is so very true. I find when I talk to people on a regular basis about their books, and I'm going to give you guys just an awful example, but someone many years ago brought us a book on overcoming perfectionism, and literally on like Rev 14, 15, 16, 17 of the manuscript, my staff is screaming at me about she has not overcome her own perfection. So, I think a lot of times that content we put out and the things we write are sometimes a reflection of what we're learning in life or what we think we've learned that still needs to be perfected. So speak to that a little bit from a spiritual standpoint, because spirituality is not something that you just like wake up and you have it one day.
So from what aspect? From spirituality? You mean in general?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I tend to think of spirituality as or philosophy as a contribution that we all make to what spirituality is, or what God is. So I think of it as maybe a potluck. You bring this, you're going to bring, maybe you bring the potato salad and someone else brings the chicken, someone else brings the barbecue. We all bring something to this, this soup that we call spirituality. But for that to happen, we have to understand ourselves. We have to be willing to be ourselves, and we have to find out what resonates with us. So, as I work with clients, so one of the things I often try to get them to do is to find out what works with them, what's speaking to them. So it calls for a lot of self-awareness, I would say, and also being willing to let go, and to understand that, I feel like things that don't go our way are often a blessing for us. And that's what helps us develop our spiritual power. When they don't go our way, this is when over time we start to see the blessings in it. And that's where our gift comes out. But if things go our way, a lot of times, then that doesn't happen. We don't get a chance to really develop spiritually.
Yeah, that is so true. Understanding and being able to see the patterns and acknowledging that, whoa, this has happened before. And why didn't I learn from it? and maybe now it's time for me to take responsibility, because I do see a lot in some of these younger, and maybe it just comes with age, where, it used to be when something bothered me, I would blame the other person. But now it's, I have to stop and say, wait a minute, what was my part in this, and why did that trigger me, and how do I get over that? And I think that is really the hardest part of the lesson, because that means I have to let go of something.
Yes. It's about patterns, and what we know of patterns is that they tend to repeat themselves, So as like a trader, so I've become a trader of financial stuff, since the first book came out. But the reason why I'm mentioning that here now, it's because as a trader, what we do is we look for patterns in the financial market. That's one of the things that we do. And these patterns, they tend to repeat. And so if you understand where the pattern has been, then you can position yourself to potentially create more abundance. But it's about patterns. So everything is about patterns. A lot of spirituality is about patterns. Everything, relationships, like you said, people tend to repeat patterns. If they were in an abusive relationship before, they tend to go back into another abusive type of relationship.
Yes, absolutely. So when you're working with people, how do you, I'm sure you see when you're listening, which I'm sure that being a customer service rep was huge, and letting you listen. I could imagine myself listening and doing some eye rolling. So, bless you for not eye rolling and just listening.
Oh, sure.
But what I was going to say is, are you bold about, saying, hey, Juliet, I'm hearing a pattern here. Are you hearing it? Do you actually bring awareness to them about what you're hearing from your listening skills and all of this?
Right. Yeah. And so what I do, one of the things I like to do is I like to, let clients know what area of their life they should be focusing on at this point. So, for example, sometimes someone might be focused on, let's say, finances, their money, right? But maybe what it is they really should be focused on more on their relationships, because if they're in a toxic relationship, they'll never be able to build wealth. Why? Well, because they'll be too stressed out to take the steps that they should be taking, because so much of their lives, so much of their time is spent worrying about or stressing about a relationship that they're in. Or it could be that what they're meant to learn at that point is self-love and not being in a relationship. Sometimes maybe they want to be in a relationship, but that's not really where their focus should be. It should be on filling themselves up with their own spirit, so that they're less dependent on, looking for someone else to fill them up. Or maybe what they should be working on is their emotional health, mental health. That should be step number one, So that's one of the so I always point out where their focus should be, what their primary focus should be, and what their secondary focus should be.
Yeah. One of the quotes we took from your book for the bestseller campaign was, give up the need to know how it will happen, give up the need to know when it will happen, and give up the need to control how it will happen. Leave such details in the hands of God and your ancestors. So that's that letting go thing again, isn't it?
It is. It is. And so what it is that going back to spirituality, I mean, regardless of what tradition one practices, when we step into spirituality, we're really stepping into something that's infinite. It's an infinite pool. And what God can do for our lives is infinite. It's just beyond our understanding. And so here's an example that I don't know if I mentioned this to you in detail, but a few weeks ago, back in November, things were a bit slow in my business. And, I said, well, it was, kind of trying, which is not unusual this time of the year.
Right.
And, I was cleaning up my house because a client was coming over for a consultation, and I saw this envelope, and it was from my bank. And so I thought it was a bill saying that, oh, I'm behind on my mortgage again, just, and it was a check. It was a cashier's check for 16 grand.
Yes, you did tell me this.
Right. And so what they said, what the letter said, oh, we did a review of your account and we saw that some payments were misapplied. I have no idea what they're talking about. They said, if you have any questions or concerns, call us. I didn't have any questions or concerns. I deposited the check. But my point in saying that, I had no idea that I would be getting 16 grand at this time of the year, just like that, which is what helped me pay off, the balance so that I could do the book this year, because prior to then I was thinking, well, I'll be able to work on moving the book forward next year, but not this year. But did I know that some check would be coming in the mail for 16 grand? No. And so saying that to say, there's a plan for all of us. I feel God has a plan for all of us. And it's limitless in terms of what could happen for us and how it could happen. So if we trust more and let go of our expectations and, because an ordinary mindset might have said, well, look for some other job or whatever, or get a loan or whatever. But here it is. A check just came in the mail out of the blue, unexpectedly. And in my tradition, 16 is a sacred number anyway. And so it let me know that, this is just a message from my ancestors to keep trusting and to just do the work that, I've been called to do.
That is so amazing. But learning to trust is probably one of the hardest things you can do, because especially I'm a type A personality. So for me, this was a journey to be like, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I'm going to move on with my day. And learning how to do that was a real change for me. It was scary at first, but now I do it all the time.
Yeah, and it's hard because, we live in a society that's kind of type A driven in a sense, and so a lot of us are trained to be control freaks. And, we're trained to think, we need to have all the answers and we need to have it all figured out, and we need to be planning every single aspect of our lives, which we can't do anyway, and so the beauty of adversity is that it helps us disrupt. It comes as a blessing sometimes to disrupt our plan so that this greater plan can unfold, can become clear to us over time,
Yeah. Do you feel like most people really have to hit rock bottom with a situation before they find? I kind of feel that way too about.
Well, someone asked me that question recently. I wouldn't say that necessarily that they have to hit rock bottom, but what I would say is that, let's say they didn't hit rock bottoms. They weren't necessarily rock bottom. They would still get like something would still happen on their journey that would cause them that would become a catalyst for the growth. So they could like be doing well and not be at rock bottom. They could be, for example, happy in a relationship and things are moving. And then they meet this other person, they realize it's their soulmate, but they weren't at rock bottom. But now this soulmate starts to make them question everything that they thought was, their life for the last 10 or 15 years or whatever. So I think that as we go along, either way, something will happen that will trigger us to grow in a different way. For some people, it is rock bottom. So maybe for a lot of people. But like, for example, as I look back at my son, and when he was going through, we were always supportive parents. So like when this thing happened where he wanted to be a thug, that just was out of the blue. How could you want to be a thug? Didn't you have the horseback riding lessons? Didn't you come with me on flying lessons? Didn't we take you to all these museums? So how could you possibly want to be a thug? But he did, right? That was where he was going. But But his wanting to be a thug has turned out to be a blessing for me, for well, not just for me, but for other people, because it helped me to bring more spirituality into the world, which was part of, my purpose.
Yeah, yeah. And I had much the same thing. I had a period I went through. My whole original family died in 7 years. And suddenly I was on my own, and it was like, wow, I don't have a family with expectations. Now I can be what I want to be, which it shouldn't have taken that to make that happen in many ways. So yeah, a lot of times there is a catalyst that comes along that really does push that. And I'm so shocked that your son wanted to be a thug. I thought that happened with kids that didn't have a really close family unit. And I can tell, I talked to your wife, I could tell you guys are a really good family unit.
Right. So that was surprising.
Yeah.
Because he had, like, quote unquote, everything. Every summer, often, I would take him back to where I'm from, St. Croix, Virgin Islands. So he had, loving grandparents. He had all these elements in his life, but still he had that need where at that time he wanted to act out. Wanted something else, so yes.
That's so what. So you guys, the book is coming out. It's called Meditations Across the King's River, African Inspired Wisdom for Life's Journey. And the new release for it, the updated version, will be out on February 7th. So, you guys, this comes out on February or on January 31st, I believe. So, get out there and buy it in pre-sale. And we need like 200 reviews this time. How does that sound, James?
It sounds great.
All right. Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes.